Tired of climbing with the same old aggro decks? Want to stop your opponent from having too much fun? Are you secretly an evil sociopath? Well, then this deck is for you. Today we are delving into the history of my favorite archetype in all of MTG, Blue-White Control. Hello, it's me, it's CGB, and welcome to the first episode of Deckmasters. The concept of blue-white control was invented by a pro player named Brian Wiseman in 1996. The formula behind this deck redefined the traditional constraints of creature-based MTG strategies. Wiseman was so convinced he had broken the early MTG meta that he named his creation The Deck. It relied on card advantage, a new concept at the time, using artifacts like Disrupting Scepter and Gemande Tome, along with removal spells and counter spells to prolong the game. Wiseman's ideas created the control archetype. The win con in those early days was often Sarah Angel, a 4/4 flying creature with vigilance. As would often be the case with blue-white control, the win con was largely irrelevant. Once the pilot had a hand filled with counter spells, almost anything could finish the opponent off. The deck was designed for vintage play, which was called Type 1 back then, but the concepts introduced were quickly adopted by standard players as well. 1996 also happened to be the year of the first ever Pro Tour in New York City, and it was a blue-white control deck that won the whole thing. Michael Locanto revealed a new win con, decking the opponent with Millstone. It turned out that running the opponent out of cards was a very legitimate win con once you neutralized all of their threats. This was the deck that changed my life in MTG and turned me into a blue-white control mage forever. Only 1 year later, the first ever standard rotation happened, and a new expansion called Alliances was released. John Finkel, arguably the best Magic player of all time, adjusted the deck to incorporate new cards from the new set. And a new win con was found as well, and this time it was a land. Sheldorn Outpost was an uncounterable creature generator, and it would slowly, very slowly, create an army of 1/1s that would eventually finish a frustrated opponent off. Finkel's deck, nicknamed Counterpost, finished in 5th place at 1997 US Nationals, and would once again solidify blue-white control as a legitimate strategy in Standard. Throughout the years, blue-white control would go through many changes, and would see varying levels of play depending on the cards legal in Standard at the time. But no meta revolved around the deck more than the Caw-Blade meta. Back in 2011, known creature enthusiast Brian Kibler created a deck that contained only 4 creatures, Squadron Hawks. This little bird could find 3 copies of itself, and then replace them with more counterspells and removal spells using one of the most popular control planeswalkers of all time, Jace, the Mind Sculptor. This strategy was soon combined with Stoneforge Mystic and Sword of Feast and Famine to create one of the most unbalanced metagames ever, with nearly 88% of decks in pro tournaments running this strategy. This dominance would eventually end when Wizards decided to ban Jace the Mind Sculptor and Stoneforge Mystic in Standard. One of the next highlights for blue-white control came in 2015 when Ivan Flock won Pro Tour Magic 2015 with possibly the most salt-inducing win con in the history of the game. Flock's list has endless amounts of counterspells, card draw, and board wipes, while also playing one little copy of Elixir of Immortality. This build of the deck didn't even do the opponent the courtesy of milling them out. Instead, Flock would cast larger and larger Sphinx's Revelations until he had access to his entire deck and an outrageous life total, and then he would shuffle all of those nasty cards back into his library over and over and over. This would be the last time Elixir of Immortality was ever legal in Standard. The next iconic blue-white control card would land in 2018 with the release of Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Teferi provided card draw an even stronger single target removal ability, and an ultimate emblem that exiled permanents whenever Teferi's controller drew a card. What was even more egregious was that Teferi offered players a sneaky win con as well. By targeting Teferi with its own ability, a player could never run out of cards. This allowed the blue-white player to once again play a deck loaded with answers and offer no way to end the opponent's suffering through combo or combat. Greg Orange, aka the Citrus Assassin, used this strategy to win Pro Tour 25th anniversary with his freshly squeezed control list. Perhaps the highest of high points for blue-white control came in 2020, when a man who some consider to be the greatest Magic player of all time took the deck all the way to the top. Paulo Vitor Dama de Rosa won World Championship 26 with a deck containing Dream Trawler, Teferi Time Raveler, and Absorb. Defeating Marcio Carvalho's Fires of Invention deck in the finals, PVDDR claimed competitive Magic's ultimate prize with one of its most iconic strategies. Even today, blue-white control continues to put up impressive results in Standard, as well as other larger formats like Pioneer and Modern. Most recently, former world champion Yuta Takahashi played a creatureless list in Pro Tour Outlaws of Thunder Junction and earned a second place finish using some new counterspells with upside. Personally, blue-white control is my favorite deck of all time. The skill expressions from piloting the deck, the resource management, and the constant battle to extend the game make this an interesting archetype. Control will always be a controversial strategy in MTG. Many players despise the strategy and have a visceral negative reaction to a deck that doesn't even try to win with combat. On the other hand, the players who love blue-white control really love blue-white control. And because of that die-hard fanbase, it is likely that Wizards of the Coast will continue to print powerful cards for the strategies for years to come. We can always expect some kind of control deck to be present in a healthy Standard format. Which side are you on? Is blue-white control a toxic strategy? Does it promote unhealthy play patterns in the game? What could Wizards do to make this archetype more appealing to a wider audience? And most importantly, what deck do you want me to cover next? Let me know in the comments section, and I'll see you on the next episode of Deckmasters. You're cool.